The blood-red sunset cast long shadows over Tonopah, Nevada territory. As Katherine Ellery walked briskly down the dusty main street, her medicine bag clutched tightly to her chest. The year was 1876, and the silver mining boom had transformed this once quiet stretch of desert into a bustling frontier town filled with fortune seekers, desperate families, and those running from their pasts. Katherine was running too not from the law, but from whispers that followed her like a persistent shadow. "There she goes," a woman hissed from the boardwalk, pulling her young daughter closer. "The witch." Katherine kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. At 24 years old, she had grown accustomed to the suspicious glances and hushed accusations. It hadn't always been this way. When she first arrived in Tonopah 6 months ago, the townsfolk had welcomed another healer with open arms. The mining accidents alone kept the town's only doctor overwhelmed, and Katherine's knowledge of herbal remedies had initially been viewed as a blessing. That changed when the fever hit. 3 children had already died before Katherine began treating the sick with a bitter tea made from desert sage, willow bark, and other plants she gathered from the surrounding hills. When 5 children recovered under her care, the town doctor had given up for dead, the whispers began. "No natural medicine works that fast," they said. "She must have made a deal with the devil." Katherine reached the small cabin at the edge of town that served as both her home and her healing place. Inside, 8-year-old Tommy Miller lay on a cot, his mother Martha sitting anxiously beside him. The boy's forehead glistened with sweat, his breathing labored. "Miss Ellery," Martha stood, wringing her apron with worried hands. "He's getting worse." Katherine set down her bag and immediately went to the boy's side. His fever had spiked since morning. "How long has he been like this?" "The shaking started about an hour ago," Martha replied, her voice quavering. "Doc Sullivan came by earlier and said to prepare myself, that there's nothing to be done." Katherine pressed her lips together. Sullivan was a decent doctor when it came to setting bones and stitching wounds, but he relied too heavily on outdated remedies that often did more harm than good. "I've brought fresh herbs," Katherine said, keeping her voice calm as she began unpacking her bag. "And I've prepared a stronger tincture. It worked for the Reynolds children. It should work for Tommy too." Martha nodded, desperation written across her face. "I don't care what they say about you, Miss Ellery. Just save my boy." Katherine worked through the night, applying cool compresses to Tommy's forehead and administering doses of her medicine every few hours. By dawn, the boy's fever had broken, and he was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Martha, who had eventually fallen asleep in a chair beside the bed, awoke to find Katherine checking Tommy's pulse. "He's going to be fine," Katherine assured her with a tired smile. "The worst has passed." Tears welled in Martha's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, clasping Katherine's hand. "I don't know how to repay you." "There's no need. Just take him home when he wakes and make sure he drinks plenty of water." After Martha and Tommy left later that morning, Katherine allowed herself a moment of rest. She sat on her small porch, watching as the town came to life. The distant clang of hammers from the mines echoed across the valley, while wagons rolled along the main street delivering goods to the general store and saloons. Her moment of peace was short-lived. Sheriff Tanner approached, his expression grim beneath the brim of his hat. Behind him walked Reverend Porter and 3 town council members, including Dr. Sullivan. "Miss Ellery," Sheriff Tanner said, removing his hat, "we need to have a word." Katherine rose to her feet, brushing dust from her skirt. "What can I do for you, gentlemen? It's about your practices." Reverend Porter stepped forward, Bible clutched in his hands. "There have been complaints." "Complaints." Katherine's voice remained steady, though her heart began to race. "About healing the sick," Dr. Sullivan scoffed, "about using unnatural methods. The Miller boy was at death's door yesterday. I've seen that fever take stronger men in days. No tea or poultice brings someone back from that brink." "Yet Tommy is alive and recovering," Katherine countered. "I would think a doctor would be pleased by such an outcome, regardless of the method." "Unless that method involves witchcraft," one of the council members muttered. Sheriff Tanner held up his hand. Now, we're not making any official accusations here, Miss Ellery, but folks are scared. 3 more cases of fever were reported this morning. People are saying you brought this sickness to town. That's absurd, Katherine replied, anger flaring in her chest. The fever follows the miners. It's in the camps all along the Comstock. It has nothing to do with me. Nevertheless, Reverend Porter interjected, we think it would be best if you suspended your activities for the time being, at least until people calm down. Katherine looked from face to face, finding no sympathy. And let people suffer, let children die. I cannot do that, Reverend. Then we cannot guarantee your safety, Sheriff Tanner said gravely. There's talk of running you out of town. Some are even suggesting more permanent solutions to the problem you pose. A chill ran down Katherine's spine. She knew what happened to women accused of witchcraft, even in this supposedly modern age. The frontier had its own brutal form of justice. I've done nothing wrong, she said firmly. I help people. You have until sundown tomorrow to close up shop, Sheriff Tanner declared, placing his hat back on his head. After that, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave Tonopah. The men turned and walked away, leaving Katherine standing alone on her porch, the weight of their ultimatum settling on her shoulders like a stone. She spent the rest of the day pacing her small cabin, alternating between fury and despair. She had nowhere to go. The little money she'd saved was barely enough to feed herself for a month, let alone establish a new life elsewhere. And what of the sick children? Who would care for them if she left? As evening approached, a soft knock at her door interrupted her troubled thoughts. Katherine opened it cautiously, half expecting an angry mob. Instead, she found Martha Miller standing there with a basket covered with a checkered cloth. I brought you some bread and preserves, Martha said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. It's not much, but… Thank you, Martha, Katherine replied, touched by the gesture. Please come in. Once inside, Martha's composure cracked. I heard what they're planning. It's not right, Miss Ellery. Tommy would be dead if not for you. Many in town don't see it that way, Katherine said softly. They see only what they fear. What will you do? Katherine sighed. I don't know. I can't abandon those who need me, but I can't fight the entire town either. Martha squeezed her hand. There are others who feel as I do, not many, but some, perhaps if we spoke up together. I appreciate that, Martha, but I won't put you in danger. You have Tommy to think about. After Martha left, Katherine sat at her small table picking at the bread without appetite. Night fell, and with it came a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would face it with dignity. She would not run away like a criminal. The sound of a horse approaching drew her attention. It was well past midnight, too late for casual visitors. Katherine grabbed the small pistol she kept for protection and moved to the window. A tall figure dismounted from a black horse in front of her cabin. Even in the dim moonlight, she could see he was a stranger, broad-shouldered and dressed like a cowboy, with a dark hat pulled low over his face. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to handling himself in dangerous situations. The stranger approached her door and knocked firmly. Katherine kept the pistol at her side as she cracked the door open. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. The man removed his hat, revealing a handsome face with keen blue eyes and a strong jawline. A thin scar ran along his left cheek, and several days' worth of stubble darkened his face. He looked to be in his early 30s. "Name's Kieran Wade," he said, his voice deep and tinged with a slight southern drawl. "I was told I could find a healer here." Katherine studied him suspiciously. "You're not from Tonopah. Just rode in this evening." His gaze dropped to the pistol in her hand. "I'm not looking for trouble, madam. I've got a wound that needs tending, is all." She noticed then that he was holding his side and dark stains marked his shirt beneath his coat. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped back. "Come in, Mr. Wade. But keep your hands where I can see them." He entered, moving with a slight limp. Now in the lamplight, Katherine could see the exhaustion in his face and the pallor beneath his tan. "Sit there," she instructed, pointing to a chair near the stove. She kept the pistol visible as she gathered her supplies. "How did you get injured?" "Had a disagreement with some men about 10 miles east of here," he replied, easing himself into the chair with a wince. They took exception to me passing through their territory, bandits of a sort. They wore badges, but they weren't any lawmen I'd recognize as honorable. Katherine frowned. Remove your coat and shirt. I need to see the wound. Kieran complied, revealing a lean, muscular torso marked with old scars. A fresh wound on his right side oozed blood, a bullet grazed that had torn a 3-inch gash through his flesh. You're lucky, Katherine said, setting down the pistol to examine the wound. Another inch to the left and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Luck's a matter of perspective, he replied with a grimace. Still hurts like hell. Katherine worked efficiently, cleaning the wound with whiskey and preparing a poultice of yarrow and plantain to stop the bleeding. This will sting, she warned before applying it. Kieran inhaled sharply but didn't flinch. I've had worse. I'm sure you have, she murmured, noticing the bullet scar on his shoulder and knife marks across his ribs. You've lived a dangerous life, Mr. Wade. Most lives out here are dangerous in one way or another, he replied, watching her hands as she worked. I heard in town that you're in some trouble yourself. Katherine's movements faltered. News travels fast. Small towns run on gossip. They're saying you're a witch. She met his gaze directly. And what do you think, Mr. Wade? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I think a real witch wouldn't be living in a cabin treating minors' children for pennies. She'd be somewhere getting rich off her powers. Despite herself, Katherine laughed. It had been a long time since she'd found anything amusing. A practical assessment. I'm a practical man. His expression grew serious. They also say you're being run out of town tomorrow. That's true. She began bandaging his side. Sheriff's orders. Where will you go? I haven't decided. Perhaps Carson City. There are more educated people there, less superstition. Kieran was silent as she finished tending his wound. When she had tied off the bandage, he reached for his shirt but paused. I'm heading north, he said abruptly. To Virginia City. I know people there, good people who could use someone with your skills. No one would question your methods. Katherine regarded him skeptically. And why would you help me? You don't know me. I know enough. He nodded toward his bandaged side. You didn't have to help me. Most folks would have slammed the door in my face, especially with half the town calling them a witch. That tells me something about your character. Before she could respond, a rock crashed through the window, shattering glass across the floor. Kieran was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the gun at his hip. Witch, a voice shouted from outside. Come out and face judgment. Katherine peered through the broken window. A group of about a dozen men stood in the moonlight, several holding torches. At their head stood Dr. Sullivan and Reverend Porter. They've moved up their timeline, she said grimly. Is there a back way out? Kieran asked, already moving toward his coat. Through the bedroom, but my horse is in the stable next to the house. They'll see us. Kieran peered out the window, assessing the situation. My horse is tied at the side. If we can reach him, we might outrun them. Another rock hit the cabin, followed by a flaming torch that landed on the porch. Get what you need, Kieran instructed, drawing his pistol. We're leaving now. Katherine grabbed her medicine bag and hastily stuffed it with herbs, tinctures, and personal items. She had just snatched up a small pouch of money when the front door splintered open. 2 miners burst in, faces contorted with self-righteous anger. They froze at the sight of Kieran's raised gun. Evening, gentlemen, he said coolly. I suggest you step back outside. This ain't your business, stranger, one of them growled. The witch has to answer for her crimes. What crimes would those be? Kieran's voice remained calm, but his finger tensed on the trigger. Saving children. Healing the sick, unnatural magic, the second man spat. She's bringing the devil's work to Tonopah. Katherine emerged from the bedroom, her bag clutched to her chest. I've never harmed anyone. Everything I've done has been to help. Lies. Reverend Porter appeared in the doorway, his face illuminated by the growing flames on the porch. She bewitches the innocent with her potions and spells. More men crowded behind the reverend, their faces twisted with fear and hatred. Katherine felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. This was quickly becoming a situation no one would walk away from unharmed. Last chance to leave peacefully, Kieran warned, his gun unwavering. There's one of you and 12 of us, Dr. Sullivan called from outside. Be sensible, man. Kieran's response was immediate and unexpected. He fired a shot into the ceiling, the sound deafening in the small cabin. As the men instinctively ducked, he grabbed Catherine's arm. "Run," he ordered, pulling her toward the bedroom. They burst through the back door into the cool night air. Kieran's black horse stood tethered nearby, pawing nervously at the ground. Behind them, shouts of alarm and rage indicated the mob had recovered from their surprise. Kieran helped Katherine mount, then swung up behind her in one fluid motion. He spurred the horse into motion just as the first men rounded the corner of the burning cabin. A few shots rang out, but they were already galloping into the darkness, leaving Tonopah and its superstitious fury behind. They rode hard for several miles, following the rough trail north toward the mountains. The horse, a powerful Mustang Kieran called Shadow, carried them steadily despite the double burden. Only when they reached a sheltered ravine did Kieran finally slow their pace. "We should be safe here for a few hours," he said, dismounting and helping Katherine down. "They won't follow far in the dark." Katherine sank onto a boulder, her body aching from the hard ride and the even harder realization that she could never return to the place she had tried to make her home. "My cabin," she said softly, "all my supplies, my books." "I'm sorry," Kieran replied, unsaddling Shadow to give the horse a rest, "but it's just things. You got out with your life." "Thanks to you." She looked up at him, truly seeing him for the first time since their escape. In the pale moonlight, his face seemed carved from stone, handsome but weathered by years of hardship. "Why did you risk yourself for me, the truth this time?" Kieran was silent for a long moment as he spread the saddle blanket on the ground. "My sister," he finally said, his voice low. "She was like you, a healer, had a gift for it. During a cholera outbreak in our town, she saved dozens with her remedies, but when the preacher's son died, the one patient she couldn't save, they called her a witch." His jaw tightened. "I was away driving cattle to Kansas City. By the time I got back, they'd already hung her." Katherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "I'm so sorry. It was 5 years ago." He sat down beside her, staring into the darkness. "When I heard them talking about you in the saloon tonight, it was like hearing her story all over again. I couldn't let it happen, not when I had the chance to stop it." They sat in silence for a time, the weight of his confession hanging between them. "What were you really doing in Tonopah?" Katherine finally asked. "You're not just a cowboy passing through." A faint smile touched his lips. "Perceptive, I'm hunting a man. Former lawman turned outlaw. He's been terrorizing towns throughout Nevada, running protection rackets with a gang of ex-deputies. The men who shot me were some of his crew." "Is that why you're headed to Virginia City?" He nodded. "Word is he's set up operations there, targeting the silver mines." Katherine considered this information. "So you're what, a bounty hunter? U.S. Marshal," he corrected, reaching into his coat to produce a silver badge. "Though I don't advertise it. Easier to track men when they don't know they're being hunted." The revelation surprised her. Kieran Wade didn't fit her image of a lawman. He was too rough around the edges, too comfortable operating in the shadows. "You don't seem like most marshals I've met," she observed. "I'm not." His blue eyes met hers. "I go where others won't, do what needs doing. Some call it being a necessary evil. And what do you call it? Justice." He stood, checking Shadow's flank. "We should move on soon. There's an old line shack about 3 hours north where we can rest properly." They rode through the remainder of the night, the terrain growing more rugged as they ascended into the foothills. Katherine found herself acutely aware of Kieran's solid presence behind her, his arm occasionally steadying her when the trail grew treacherous. Despite her exhaustion and the trauma of the night's events, she felt strangely secure. Dawn was breaking when they reached the line shack, a simple one-room structure used by cattlemen during seasonal roundups. It was dusty and sparse, containing only a rough bed frame, a table with 2 chairs, and a small iron stove. "It's not much," Kieran said as he lit a fire in the stove, "but it's secure." Katherine set down her medicine bag and looked around. "It's better than sleeping in the open." While Kieran tended to Shadow, Katherine took stock of her supplies. She had managed to grab her most essential herbs and tinctures, but many irreplaceable items had been left behind. When Kieran returned, he carried a small sack. Found some coffee and beans stored in the lean-to, probably left by the last cowboys through here. He brewed coffee while Katherine prepared a simple meal from the beans and dried meat from her bag. They ate in companionable silence, both too tired for conversation. "You should rest," Kieran said when they had finished. "I'll keep watch." Katherine wanted to protest he was injured and needed rest as much as she did, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. She lay down on the bed frame, using her shawl as a pillow. She woke hours later to find the shack filled with golden afternoon light. Kieran sat by the window, cleaning his pistol with practiced movements. "How long did I sleep?" she asked, sitting up. "Most of the day," he replied, reassembling the weapon. "You needed it." She noticed he had changed the bandage on his side, using supplies from her bag. "How's your wound?" "Healing clean, your poultice did its work." He holstered the pistol. "No sign of pursuit, but we should move on at dusk. The trail to Virginia City will take us through some rough country. Better to travel at night when it's cooler." Katherine nodded, then hesitated. "Mr. Wade, Kieran," he corrected. "Kieran," she continued. "I appreciate everything you've done, but I don't want to endanger your mission. If these outlaws you're tracking are as dangerous as you say, having me along will only complicate things." His expression remained impassive. "Where would you go instead?" The question hung in the air. Katherine had no ready answer. She had no family, no close friends beyond Tonopah. Her parents had died years ago in a fire that consumed their Pennsylvania home, leaving her alone in the world at 18. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I can make my way." "In these mountains, alone," Kieran shook his head. "The nearest settlement is 30 miles north, and that's just a mining camp. Virginia City is your best chance for a fresh start. It's a real city with people from all over the world. They're less likely to fear what they don't understand." "And after Virginia City?" "What then?" Kieran met her gaze steadily. "That depends on you. You could set up practice there or move on to San Francisco. Either way, I'll make sure you get there safely." There was something in his voice that made Katherine believe him completely. Despite knowing him less than a day, she trusted Kieran Wade in a way she had trusted few people in her life. "All right," she agreed. "Virginia City it is." They set out at dusk as planned, following a narrow trail that wound through pine forests and rocky passes. Kieran seemed to know the route well, navigating confidently even as night fell. They rode double again, though Kieran had offered to walk and lead the horse. "Shadow can handle both of us," he had insisted, "and we'll make better time." The night was clear and cool, the sky ablaze with stars. Katherine found herself relaxing against Kieran's chest, lulled by the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the warmth of his body behind her. "Tell me about your healing," Kieran said after they had ridden in silence for some time. "Where did you learn it?" "My grandmother taught me," Katherine replied, memories of the stern but loving woman filling her mind. She was from England originally, brought her knowledge of herbs and remedies with her when she came to America as a girl. People in our town in Pennsylvania respected her skills, called her a wise woman, never a witch. "Times are different on the frontier," Kieran observed. "People are more afraid here, more suspicious of what they don't understand." "My grandmother warned me about that. She said fear makes people cruel," Katherine sighed. "I should have been more careful in Tonopah, less obvious with my methods." "Or maybe the world should be less cruel to women with gifts," Kieran countered. "My sister used to say that healing wasn't just about knowing which plants cure which ailments, it was about understanding the connection between all living things." Katherine turned slightly to look at him, surprised by his insight. "That's exactly it. Everything in nature has a purpose, a connection. The same plant that can heal in one form can harm in another. It's about balance and intention." "That sounds more like wisdom than witchcraft to me." They continued through the night, stopping occasionally to rest the horse and stretch their legs. By midnight, they had climbed high enough to look back over the valley they had left behind. In the distance, the scattered lights of Tonopah glimmered like fallen stars. No regrets. Kieran asked, noticing Katherine's gaze. "Some," she admitted. "I helped people there, children who might now go without care." There will be children who need you in Virginia City, too. They pressed on, the trail growing steeper and more treacherous. In some places, it narrowed to barely the width of the horse, with sheer drop-offs to one side. Kieran dismounted for these sections, leading Shadow carefully while Katherine remained in the saddle. It was during one such passage, with dawn just beginning to lighten the eastern sky, that they heard the distant sound of horses. Kieran froze, listening intently. 3 riders moving fast, he said quietly. Could be a posse from Tonopah, or it could be trouble of another kind. He quickly led Shadow off the trail and into a dense stand of pines. The horse was well trained, standing perfectly still as they waited, barely breathing. The riders appeared minutes later, moving at a dangerous pace along the narrow trail. Even in the dim light, Katherine could see they weren't men from Tonopah. These men were hard-looking, heavily armed and dressed in the dusty clothes of career outlaws. "Radley's men," Kieran whispered, his hand moving to his pistol. "Looking for me, most likely." The men passed without noticing them, continuing up the trail toward the pass. "That complicates things," Kieran said once they were out of earshot. "They're headed for Virginia City, too. Will they recognize you there? Some might. I've had run-ins with a few of them before." He frowned, considering their options. "There's another route we could take, longer but safer, goes through Washoe Valley." Katherine shook her head. "You need to stop this Radley person, that's your duty. Don't change your plans because of me." Kieran studied her face. "It's dangerous." "Life is dangerous," she replied simply. "I won't be responsible for letting an outlaw continue terrorizing innocent people." A slow smile spread across Kieran's face, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "You're not what I expected, Katherine Ellery. Neither are you, Marshal Wade." They continued their journey as the sun rose, taking a more cautious pace now that they knew Radley's men were ahead. By midday, they had crossed the summit of the mountain pass and begun their descent toward Washoe Valley, with Virginia City visible in the distance, perched on the slopes of Mount Davidson. Even from miles away, Katherine could see it was unlike any frontier town she had encountered. Virginia City sprawled across the mountainside, a proper city with substantial buildings, church spires, and the industrial structures of the silver mines that had made it famous. "The richest city in America," Kieran said, following her gaze, "built on the Comstock lode. More silver and gold has come out of those mines than anywhere else in the country. It's larger than I imagined. Population of about 15,000. People from every corner of the world: Chinese, Irish, Cornish miners, Mexican laborers. Even a small community of doctors and scientists studying the mines." He pointed to a section of the city. "That's where you'll find the most civilized reception for your skills." They made camp that night in a sheltered hollow, still a good day's ride from the city. Kieran built a small fire, screened by rocks to minimize visibility. They shared the last of their provisions, planning to reach Virginia City by the following evening. As night fell, Katherine found herself watching Kieran across the fire. In the dancing light, his features seemed less harsh, the constant vigilance in his eyes softening as he stared into the flames. "Tell me about Radley," she said. "What makes him so dangerous that a U.S. Marshal would hunt him alone?" Kieran looked up, his expression darkening. "James Radley was a sheriff in a mining town in Colorado. Used his badge to extort businesses, steal claims from miners, even ordered killings disguised as legal executions. When the territorial government finally moved against him, he fled with a group of deputies loyal to him. And now he's doing the same in Nevada, on a larger scale. He's smart, connected, has friends in powerful places who turn a blind eye to his operations in exchange for a cut." Kieran's jaw tightened. "I've been tracking him for 8 months, building a case. 3 marshals before me tried and ended up dead." "Is that why you work alone, to protect other lawmen?" A humorless smile touched his lips. "Partly, but mostly because I'm good at it. I was a scout during the war, learned to move unseen to survive in hostile territory. The Civil War." Katherine asked, though she already knew the answer. Kieran would have been the right age to have fought. He nodded. "Cavalry scout for the Union. Spent most of the war behind Confederate lines, gathering intelligence." His gaze returned to the fire. Teaches you a lot about people who can be trusted, who will break under pressure. Is that why you trusted me? Katherine asked softly. Your instincts told you I could be trusted. Kieran was quiet for a long moment. That and something else. He looked up at her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. When I saw you facing down that mob, there was no fear in your eyes. Caution, yes, sadness, definitely, but not fear. That's rare. I was terrified, she admitted, but you didn't let it control you. He stoked the fire with a stick. Few people have that kind of courage. They fell silent, the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a night bird the only sounds. Katherine felt a strange tension building between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with unspoken possibilities. We should rest, Kieran finally said, breaking the spell. I'll take first watch, Katherine nodded, settling onto her bedroll. Despite the hard ground and the lingering worry about what awaited them in Virginia City, she fell asleep quickly, lulled by the knowledge that Kieran Wade was keeping watch. She woke some hours later to find him still sitting by the dying fire, his profile silhouetted against the starlit sky. He turned as if sensing her gaze. Can't sleep, he asked quietly, just restless. She sat up, pulling her shawl around her shoulders against the night chill. You should have woken me for my watch. Wasn't tired. He added a small branch to the embers. Besides, I like the night, it's peaceful. Katherine moved closer to the fire, sitting near him on a fallen log. You don't seem like someone who's known much peace in your life. Not much, he agreed, but moments like this, quiet nights, open sky, that's as close as I get. What will you do? After Radley, I mean, he shrugged. There's always another outlaw, another case. But something in his voice suggested uncertainty, as if he had begun questioning that path. Always alone? Katherine asked, the question escaping before she could reconsider it. Kieran turned to her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. It's simpler that way, safer for everyone involved, but lonely. Yes. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. It is that. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Katherine felt something shift, a connection forming that transcended their brief acquaintance. In that moment, she saw not just the hardened lawman but the man beneath, complicated, wounded, and unexpectedly vulnerable. Kieran looked away first, clearing his throat. Sun will be up soon, we should get moving. They reached Virginia City by late afternoon the next day, approaching from the south to avoid the main road where Radley's men might be watching. The city rose before them, an impressive collection of buildings clinging to the steep slope of the mountain. We'll need to be careful, Kieran said as they reached the outskirts. Radley has eyes everywhere. He led them to a modest boarding house on a side street, run by an older woman named Mrs. Donovan, who greeted Kieran like an old friend. Kieran Wade, as I live and breathe, she exclaimed, her Irish accent still strong despite years in America. It's been too long. Hello, Margaret, he replied with genuine warmth. We need a room too if you have them, and discretion. Mrs. Donovan's shrewd eyes took in Katherine, then returned to Kieran's face. Trouble is it? Always, he admitted. But not the kind you're thinking. This is Miss Katherine Ellery. She's a healer, had to leave her previous situation in a hurry. Healing, is it? Mrs. Donovan's expression softened. Well, you've come to the right place, dear. Lost my comb to the mines last year. If we'd had a proper healer instead of those butchers calling themselves doctors. She showed them to adjoining rooms on the second floor, simple but clean, with views of the city below. Rest up, Kieran told Katherine after Mrs. Donovan had left them. I need to make contact with some people, see what I can learn about Radley's operation here. I could help, Katherine offered. No one here knows my face. Kieran shook his head. Not yet. Let me get the lay of the land first. He hesitated at the door. Promise me you'll stay here until I return. Virginia City might seem civilized, but it has dangers of its own. After he left, Katherine unpacked her meager belongings and washed away the dust of travel. The simple act of cleaning herself with proper soap and water restored some sense of normalcy after the chaos of the past 2 days. From her window, she could see much of the city spread below. Mining operations dominated the landscape, with stamp mills crushing ore day and night. The constant thudding of the heavy machinery created a rhythm that seemed to pulse through the entire city. Beyond the industrial area lay the business district, with its hotels, theaters, and saloons. Virginia City was indeed a far cry from Tonopah, a metropolitan center in the midst of the frontier. Katherine was sitting by the window, watching the activity below when Mrs. Donovan knocked on her door with a tray of food. "Thought you might be hungry, dear," she said, setting down a plate of stew and bread. "Kieran didn't say how long you'd been traveling." "Thank you." Katherine welcomed the hot meal. "You've known Kieran for some time." Mrs. Donovan sat on the edge of the bed. "He saved my Combs' life once, years ago. Mine accident trapped 20 men underground. Kieran was passing through, volunteered for the rescue party. Went deeper than any of the others dared." Her eyes grew distant with memory. "Brought out 5 men, Combe among them, never asked for anything in return, just moved on like it was nothing extraordinary." "That sounds like him," Katherine said softly. The older woman studied her with knowing eyes. "He's a good man in a hard shell, doesn't let many see beneath that exterior. I've noticed." "Well," Mrs. Donovan stood, smoothing her apron, "you just holler if you need anything. Kieran said to tell you he might be late returning. Official business, I gather." Katherine spent the evening organizing her remaining medicinal supplies and planning what she would need to acquire to restart her healing practice. She had just begun writing a list when a commotion in the street below caught her attention. Looking out, she saw a group of men dragging another man from a nearby saloon. Even from a distance, she could see blood on the victim's face as they pulled him into an alley. Without thinking, Katherine grabbed her medicine bag and hurried downstairs. Mrs. Donovan was nowhere in sight as she slipped out the front door and made her way toward the alley. She knew Kieran would disapprove, but she couldn't ignore someone in need. The alley was dark, lit only by a distant street lamp. Katherine moved cautiously, guided by the sounds of struggle. Rounding a corner, she saw 3 men standing over a 4th who lay crumpled on the ground. "Please," the man on the ground was saying, "I need more time. The shipment's delayed, that's all." "Mr. Radley doesn't care for excuses," one of the standing men replied, driving his boot into the fallen man's ribs. "You pay your protection or you suffer the consequences." Katherine stepped back, intending to find help, but her foot dislodged a loose stone that clattered across the alley floor. The men turned instantly. "Well, well," the apparent leader said, his face splitting into an unpleasant smile. "What have we here? A little lady out for an evening stroll." Katherine stood her ground, though her heart pounded in her chest. "I'm a healer," she said firmly. "I heard a disturbance and thought someone might need medical attention." The men exchanged glances, clearly amused by her audacity. "A healer, boys," the leader mocked. "Ain't that convenient? Once we finish with Mr. Parker here, he's gonna need healing for sure." "Or maybe she's a spy," another suggested, his hand moving to his gun. "Watching Radley's business for someone." "I assure you I'm not spying for anyone," Katherine replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I only wanted to help." The leader approached her, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Pretty little thing, ain't you? Maybe you could help us in other ways." Katherine took a step back, but found her retreat blocked by the alley wall. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. She clutched her medicine bag tighter, wondering if she could reach the small knife inside before they grabbed her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Collins." The familiar voice came from the shadows behind the men. Kieran stepped into view, his gun already drawn and pointed at the leader's back. "Wade," the man called Collins hissed, slowly raising his hands. "Should have known you'd show up eventually." "Step away from the lady," Kieran commanded, his voice cold and precise. "All of you." The men reluctantly complied, moving to the side of the alley. "Now, I suggest you boys run along and tell Radley that Marshal Wade wants to have a word with him. Tell him I've got enough evidence to hang him and every one of his men." Collins spat on the ground. "You're a dead man, Wade." "You just don't know it yet." "Maybe," Kieran conceded with chilling calm, "but you'll be dead a lot sooner if you don't start walking." After a tense moment, the men backed away, dragging their semi-conscious victim with them. Only when they had disappeared around the corner did Kieran lower his gun and turn to Katherine. I thought I told you to stay at the boarding house, he said, his voice tight with anger and concern. I saw them attacking that man, she explained. I couldn't just watch. So you decided to walk into an alley alone against 3 armed men. He holstered his gun with more force than necessary. Do you have any idea who those men work for, what they would have done to you? I know it was foolish, Katherine admitted, but I'm a healer. I can't ignore suffering. Kieran ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Katherine, these aren't superstitious townspeople you're dealing with. These are killers who work for a man who's ordered the deaths of dozens of people, including 3 federal marshals. I understand the danger, she insisted. But that doesn't change who I am or what I do. They stared at each other in the dim light of the alley, neither willing to back down. Finally, Kieran sighed. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, he said, but the anger had drained from his voice. Come on, let's get back before they return with reinforcements. As they walked quickly back to the boarding house, Katherine noticed Kieran scanning rooftops and alleyways with practiced vigilance. His hand never strayed far from his gun. How did you find me? She asked. Mrs. Donovan saw you leave. She sent a boy to find me. He glanced at her. Lucky thing she did. Thank you, Katherine said quietly, for coming when you did. Kieran stopped, turning to face her. Katherine, I need you to understand something. Radley's men will be watching for me now, and they've seen you with me. That makes you a target, too. The implication was clear. Her presence complicated his mission and put them both at greater risk. I'll leave first thing tomorrow, she offered, though the prospect of starting over again so soon filled her with dread. Kieran studied her face in the lamplight, his expression softening. That's not what I'm saying, just be careful, stay close. We'll figure this out together. The word together lingered between them, carrying a weight neither was prepared to acknowledge. Back at the boarding house, Mrs. Donovan met them with obvious relief. Thank the saints you found her, she said to Kieran before fixing Katherine with a stern look. Virginia City isn't like other places, my dear. Danger wears a different face here, sometimes a respectable one. In Katherine's room, Kieran explained what he had learned during his day in the city. Radley's set up operations throughout the district. He's extorting protection money from businesses, controlling which claims get worked and which don't, even infiltrating the assay office to skim silver before it's registered. How does he get away with it? Katherine asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. Money buys a lot of blind eyes, Kieran replied grimly, and those who don't take bribes get threats or worse. The city marshal is in his pocket, along with at least 2 county judges. What about the miners? Surely they don't stand for this. Most are just trying to survive. The mines are dangerous enough without making enemies of men like Radley. Kieran paced the small room. But I've found allies too. The superintendent of the Consolidated Virginia Mine is organizing resistance. Several business owners are willing to testify. What's your plan? Build enough evidence to bring in federal troops from Fort Churchill. The territorial governor has promised support once we have proof that can stand in court. He stopped pacing. I'm close, Katherine. A few more days and I'll have what I need. Katherine nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. How can I help? Kieran looked surprised by the offer. You're not leaving. Would it make a difference if I did? Radley's men have seen me. They'll assume I'm involved regardless. She straightened her shoulders. Besides, I didn't escape one form of injustice just to run from another. A slow smile spread across Kieran's face, transforming his features. You continue to surprise me, Miss Ellery. Good, she replied with a smile of her own. Now, how can I help? The next day, Katherine began establishing her identity as a healer in Virginia City. With Mrs. Donovan's recommendation, she visited several businesses in the neighborhood, offering her services. She was careful to present herself as a herbalist rather than a doctor, avoiding direct confrontation with the medical establishment. By midday, she had treated a shopkeeper's infected hand, a miner's persistent cough, and a child's fever. Word spread quickly, and by evening, several more people had sought her out at the boarding house. As she worked, Katherine kept her eyes and ears open for information that might help Kieran. The people who came to her for healing often spoke freely, sharing gossip and complaints about Radley's influence over the city. When Kieran returned that evening, she had valuable intelligence to share. The woman who owns the millinery shop said Radley's men collect protection money every Friday, Katherine reported as they shared a simple dinner in her room. And the Chinese herbalist who supplies some of my materials told me Radley forces the mine owners to buy inferior timber for supports timber from forests he controls. Kieran nodded, impressed. People talk to healers. They trust you. Not all of them, Katherine admitted. The city doctor I met today was less than welcoming, called me a peddler of superstition to my face. Dr. Hargrove? Kieran asked. When Katherine nodded, he grimaced. He's in Radley's pocket, takes a percentage for treating injuries without reporting them to authorities. Over the next 3 days, they fell into a routine. Kieran would leave early to meet with potential witnesses or observe Radley's operations. Katherine would see patients and gather information. In the evenings, they would compare notes and plan their next steps. It was during these quiet evenings that Katherine found herself drawing closer to Kieran. Beyond the hardened exterior of the lawman, she discovered a man of principle and unexpected depth, someone who quoted Shakespeare from memory and could discuss philosophy as easily as tracking techniques. He listened to her stories of healing with genuine interest, never dismissing her methods as superstition or witchcraft. For his part, Kieran seemed to relax in her presence, the constant vigilance that marked his public persona giving way to something more genuine. He spoke of his childhood in Kentucky, his experiences during the war, and his decision to become a marshal afterward. I saw too much injustice to walk away, he explained one night as they sat by the window, watching the lights of the city below. Too many people suffering while others took what wasn't theirs by force or deception. Is that why you never settled down? Katherine asked. Because of the mission, Kieran was quiet for a moment, partly. But also because I never found someone who understood this life, the risks, the uncertainty. His gaze met hers. Until now, perhaps. The admission hung in the air between them, neither willing to fully acknowledge what was developing. But Katherine felt it a connection that went beyond their shared circumstance or common cause. In the short time she had known him, Kieran Wade had come to represent something she had never expected to find: acceptance without judgment, strength without dominance. On the 4th day, everything changed. Katherine had just finished treating a miner's wife for a persistent headache when Mrs. Donovan burst into the room. "They've taken him," she said breathlessly. Radley's men ambushed Kieran on B Street, 4 against 1, even he couldn't fight them all. Cold fear gripped Katherine's heart. Is he alive? Yes, for now. They dragged him toward the old Imperial mine. Mrs. Donovan wrung her hands. I sent word to his contacts at the Consolidated Virginia, but they can't move openly against Radley without exposing themselves. Katherine quickly gathered her medicine bag. Where is this Imperial mine? You can't go there alone, Mrs. Donovan protested. It's abandoned, isolated. Radley uses it for dealing with problems. Kieran would come for me, Katherine said simply. Tell me how to find it. Reluctantly, Mrs. Donovan provided directions to the mine, located on the outskirts of the city. At least take this, she said, pressing a small derringer into Katherine's hand. Combs, 2 shots. May you not need them. Katherine slipped the gun into her pocket and set out, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew a direct confrontation would be suicide. She was no gunfighter, but she had other skills, other weapons. The abandoned Imperial mine sat at the end of a desolate ravine, its collapsing headframe silhouetted against the afternoon sky. A single guard stood outside the entrance to the main tunnel, smoking a cigar with casual indifference. Katherine approached openly, her medicine bag prominently displayed. Stop right there, the guard called, straightening up. This is private property. I'm a healer, she replied calmly. I was told someone here needs medical attention. The guard frowned. Who sent you, doctor? Hargrove, Katherine lied smoothly. Said one of Mr. Radley's men was injured during an altercation. Since the doctor is occupied with a difficult birth, he sent me instead. The guard's suspicion wavered. "Wait here," he instructed, disappearing into the tunnel. Katherine used the opportunity to uncork a small bottle from her bag, pouring the contents onto her handkerchief. When the guard returned with another man, Collins, from the alley, she was prepared. "Mr. Radley wants to see her," Collins said after examining her. "Bring her in." The tunnel led deep into the mountain, illuminated by occasional oil lamps. The air grew colder and damper as they descended. Katherine counted her steps, noting side passages and potential escape routes. They finally emerged into a larger chamber that had once been a working area of the mine. Now it served a darker purpose. 3 more of Radley's men stood around a figure tied to a chair in the center of the room. Kieran's face was bruised and bloody, his left eye swollen shut. But when he saw Katherine, his right eye widened in alarm. "No," he said hoarsely. "Get her out of here." A tall man stepped forward from the shadows, distinguished-looking despite the setting, with silver-streaked dark hair and expensive clothing. His refined appearance contrasted sharply with the brutality of his surroundings. "Miss Ellery, I presume," he said smoothly. "I've heard a great deal about you, the witch of Tonopah who bewitched Marshal Wade." Katherine met his gaze steadily. "And you must be Radley. I've heard about you as well, none of it good." Radley smiled, apparently amused by her boldness. "They said you had spirit." "Tell me, what brought a woman like you into the company of a man like Wade? Surely not romance. He's hardly the type." "I need to attend to his wounds," Katherine said, ignoring the question. "Unless you intend to kill him, in which case I'm wasting my time." "Oh, I intend to kill him," Radley replied casually. "But not quite yet. You see, Marshal Wade has been a persistent thorn in my side, and I want to know exactly what evidence he's gathered and who's been helping him." He gestured to Kieran. "So far, he's been uncooperative." Katherine moved toward Kieran, her eyes assessing his injuries. Beyond the visible bruises, she could tell from his breathing that he likely had broken ribs. His right hand was swollen and discolored broken fingers, deliberately done to prevent him from using a gun. "I need water and clean cloth," she said, opening her bag. Collins stepped forward suspiciously. "Check what she's got in there." Katherine tensed as he roughly grabbed her medicine bag, dumping its contents onto a small table. He poked through the herbs, tinctures, and bandages with contempt. "Just woman's nonsense," he declared. "Plant stuff and rags. Bring her what she needs," Radley ordered. "I want Wade conscious for what comes next." As one of the men left to fetch water, Radley approached Katherine, studying her with calculating eyes. "Perhaps you could save us all some trouble, Miss Ellery. Tell me what Wade has been planning, and I might let you both live." "I'm a healer, Mr. Radley. I know nothing of Marshal Wade's official business." Katherine kept her voice steady, though fear threatened to overwhelm her. "I don't believe you," Radley said softly. "A woman doesn't risk her life entering a place like this unless she's deeply involved. Love, perhaps. Has the stoic Marshal finally found his weakness?" From the chair, Kieran strained against his bonds. "Leave her out of this, Radley." "She's got nothing to do with my investigation." "We both know that's not true," Radley replied without looking away from Katherine. "The question is how much she values your life." The man returned with a bucket of water and some rags. Katherine knelt beside Kieran, dipping a cloth into the water. "What are you doing here?" Kieran whispered as she began cleaning the blood from his face. "Saving you," she murmured back, her fingers gently assessing the extent of his injuries. "Just like you saved me, you shouldn't have come," he insisted. "It's too dangerous." Katherine leaned closer, ostensibly examining the cut above his eye. "When I apply this salve, hold your breath," she instructed quietly. "It's nightshade and Jimson weed. The fumes will make them disoriented. When I signal, be ready to move." Kieran gave a barely perceptible nod. Katherine turned to Radley. "I need to prepare a poultice for his ribs. The binding in my bag, please." Collins tossed her the roll of bandages. As Katherine worked, she surreptitiously placed the handkerchief soaked in her special preparation beneath the cloth she was using to clean Kieran's wounds. The mixture of nightshade, Jimson weed, and other herbs would release potent fumes when heated by body temperature, not enough to kill, but sufficient to cause confusion and disorientation. "Mr. Radley," she said suddenly, turning to face the outlaw. Perhaps we could speak privately. There are things I know about Marshal Wade's investigation that he hasn't shared with you. Radley raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Indeed, and you're willing to share this information? I'm willing to negotiate for our lives, Katherine replied. I'm a practical woman. While Radley considered her offer, she pressed the treated cloth firmly against Kieran's chest, activating the compounds in the mixture. Almost immediately, the pungent aroma began to fill the small space. What's that smell? Collins asked, wrinkling his nose. Medicinal herbs, Katherine explained calmly, for pain relief. But already the effects were becoming evident. Collins blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if to clear it. The other men began to show similar signs of disorientation. Something's not right, one of them slurred, reaching for his gun but fumbling with the holster. Radley, standing slightly farther away, realized too late what was happening. She's drugged us, he shouted, pulling his own weapon. Katherine lunged for her medicine bag, grabbing a vial of concentrated extract she had prepared. As Radley raised his gun, she threw the vial at his feet where it shattered, releasing a cloud of potent vapor directly into his face. He staggered backward, firing wildly into the ceiling as the drug overwhelmed his senses. Katherine used the distraction to pull Mrs. Donovan's derringer from her pocket. She fired one shot at the rope binding Kieran's hands, severing it cleanly. Freed, Kieran immediately tackled the nearest guard despite his injuries. Katherine fired her second shot at another man reaching for his weapon, the bullet grazing his arm and causing him to drop the gun. The exit, Kieran shouted, grabbing the fallen man's pistol. Run. They fled through the tunnel, the sounds of confusion and shouting echoing behind them. Kieran moved with remarkable speed despite his injuries, occasionally firing back to discourage pursuit. They emerged into the fading daylight, gasping for fresh air. The guard who had been stationed outside lay unconscious, apparently having investigated the commotion and succumbed to the same fumes that had disabled his comrades. We need to get to the Consolidated Virginia mine, Kieran said, leaning heavily against Katherine. My contacts there can protect us while we summon the federal troops. They made their way through back alleys and side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfares where Radley's men might be watching. Kieran's condition deteriorated as they moved, the adrenaline of escape giving way to the reality of his injuries. By the time they reached the mine offices, he was barely conscious, supported almost entirely by Katherine. The superintendent, a burly man named Mackenzie, rushed forward to help as they staggered through the door. Wade, what happened? He demanded, helping Katherine lower Kieran into a chair. Radley, Kieran managed. He knows about the operation. We need to send for the federal troops immediately, Katherine added, and a doctor for Marshal Wade. Mackenzie dispatched riders to Fort Churchill with Kieran's carefully gathered evidence and a request for immediate military intervention. A company doctor was summoned to treat Kieran's injuries while armed miners stood guard around the building. Katherine worked alongside the doctor, her knowledge of herbal remedies complementing his more conventional treatments. Together they set Kieran's broken fingers, bound his ribs, and treated the various cuts and bruises that covered his body. You've had training, the doctor observed as Katherine prepared a salve for Kieran's swollen eye. Of a sort, she replied cautiously. Well, whatever your methods, they seem effective, he conceded. His fever should have been much higher with injuries like these. After the doctor left, Katherine sat beside Kieran's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest as he slept. The danger was far from over. Radley would recover from the effects of her herbs and redouble his efforts to eliminate them. But for the moment, they were safe. Kieran stirred, his uninjured eye opening to focus on her face. Katherine, he murmured, you saved my life. We saved each other, she corrected gently. He reached for her hand with his unbroken one. What you did in that mine, I've never seen anything like it. Just herbs and a bit of knowledge, she said modestly. Nothing magical, I disagree. A faint smile touched his lips. When they called you a witch in Tonopah, they were half right. You do cast spells, just not the kind they feared. Katherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean, don't you? His gaze held hers. "You've cast one on me. From the moment I saw you standing up to that mob, I've been under your spell." The confession hung between them, unexpected and transformative. Katherine felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of what had been building between them since their flight from Tonopah. "Kieran," she began, unsure how to respond to such naked honesty. He squeezed her hand. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that whatever happens with Radley, whatever comes next, I'm not letting you go, not unless you want me to." Before she could respond, the door opened and Mackenzie entered with a telegram. "Troops from Fort Churchill are on their way," he announced. "Should be here by morning. The governor has issued warrants for Radley and all his known associates." Kieran nodded. "He won't go easily. He'll try to run or fight." "We're prepared," Mackenzie assured him. "Every miner in the Consolidated Virginia is armed and watching. Radley won't take us by surprise." The night passed slowly, tension building as they waited for either the arrival of federal troops or an attack from Radley's men. Katherine remained at Kieran's side, talking quietly to distract him from his pain. They spoke of their childhood's. Katherine's in Pennsylvania, where her grandmother had taught her the healing arts. Kieran's in Kentucky, where his father had been a circuit judge who instilled in him a deep sense of justice. They discovered shared loves of literature and music, and a common belief in the fundamental goodness of people despite the evil they had both witnessed. "What will you do when this is over?" Katherine asked as dawn approached. "Continue hunting outlaws across the frontier." Kieran was thoughtful. "I've been considering a change," he admitted. "The territorial governor offered me a position as federal marshal for Nevada, based in Virginia City." "A more permanent role," Katherine observed. "No more constant travel, no more constant solitude," he corrected. "If I had a reason to stay in one place." The implication was clear in his eyes as they met hers. Katherine felt her heart quicken. "Virginia City does need a proper healer," she said softly. "Someone who understands both traditional remedies and modern medicine." "Is that something you'd consider? Staying here?" Before she could answer, gunfire erupted outside the building. Mackenzie burst through the door. "Radley's men are attacking the main gate," he reported grimly. "At least 20 of them. They've got dynamite." Kieran struggled to his feet despite Katherine's protests. "Get me a gun," he ordered, "and help me to the window." From their vantage point on the second floor, they could see Radley's men advancing toward the mine complex. The miners had established defensive positions behind ore carts and equipment, returning fire when possible. "There," Kieran pointed with his uninjured hand. "That's Radley behind the water tower." Katherine could just make out the well-dressed figure directing the assault. Even from a distance, his fury was evident in his aggressive gestures. "He's desperate," Kieran observed. "He knows the federal troops are coming. This is his last chance to eliminate the witnesses against him." The battle continued for nearly an hour, neither side gaining a clear advantage. Then, just as the miners' ammunition began to run low, a new sound reached them, the rhythmic drumming of horses' hooves approaching at speed. "The cavalry," Mackenzie said with visible relief. "Right on time." The federal troops swept into the mining complex with precision, quickly surrounding Radley's men. Outnumbered and outgunned, most surrendered immediately. A few tried to flee, only to be captured by mounted soldiers who had circled behind them. Radley himself made a final, desperate attempt to escape. He mounted a horse and charged toward a gap in the cavalry line, firing wildly as he rode. Kieran raised his pistol, steadying his injured hand with his good one. Despite his condition, his aim was true. The bullet struck Radley's shoulder, knocking him from his horse. Within moments, soldiers swarmed around him, securing the fallen outlaw. "It's over," Kieran said quietly, lowering the gun. The relief in his voice was palpable. The aftermath of the battle brought a flurry of activity to Virginia City. Radley and his men were taken into federal custody, charged with numerous crimes including extortion, assault, and the murders of federal officers. The territorial governor arrived personally to thank Kieran for his service and to offer formal commendations. For Katherine, The days following Radley's capture brought unexpected recognition. Word of her role in the affair spread throughout the city, transforming her reputation from suspicious newcomer to heroic healer. Dr. Hargrove, Radley's medical accomplice, was arrested for his role in the criminal enterprise. In his absence, the city found itself in desperate need of medical expertise. Several prominent citizens, led by Mackenzie, approached Katherine with a proposition: establish a proper healing center that would combine her herbal knowledge with conventional medicine. Virginia City needs someone like you, Mackenzie told her, someone who sees beyond the usual ways of doing things. Katherine was overwhelmed by the offer. After being driven from Tonopah for her healing practices, the idea that she might be not just tolerated but celebrated for them seemed almost unbelievable. As she considered the proposal, Kieran continued his recovery in Mrs. Donovan's boarding house. His broken bones would take weeks to heal properly, but his spirits improved daily, especially during Katherine's frequent visits. One evening, as they sat together on the small balcony outside his room watching the sunset over the mountains, Kieran broached the subject they had both been circling. "I accepted the governor's offer," he said. "Federal Marshal for the Nevada Territory headquartered here in Virginia City," Katherine smiled. "I thought you might. It suits you bringing order to chaos, protecting the innocent. And you?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. "Mackenzie told me about their offer. Will you stay and establish your healing center?" "I'm considering it," she replied honestly. "It's a remarkable opportunity." But Katherine hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. "I've learned to be cautious about putting down roots. People change their minds. Today's celebrated healer can be tomorrow's accused," which Kieran reached for her hand. "Not here, not with me to stand beside you." His voice softened. "Katherine, that day in Tonopah when I said you'd cast a spell on me, I meant it. I've never met anyone like you. Your courage, your compassion, your unwavering commitment to helping others regardless of the cost to yourself. It's extraordinary." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I know we've only known each other a short time. By conventional standards, what I'm about to say is madness. But I've spent my life trusting my instincts, and every instinct I have tells me that what's between us is rare and precious." Katherine felt tears welling in her eyes as she recognized where his words were leading. "I love you," he said simply. "And if you'll have me, I want to build a life with you here. Not just as colleagues fighting injustice, but as partners in everything life brings." For a moment, Katherine couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the depth of emotion his words evoked. In the short time she had known Kieran Wade, he had shown her what true acceptance looked like, not despite her differences, but because of them. "When I was forced to leave Tonopah," she finally said, "I thought I had lost everything. My home, my purpose, my place in the world." She squeezed his hand. "I never imagined I might find something far more valuable instead." Kieran's eyes brightened with hope. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she confirmed, her voice steady with certainty. "I love you too, Kieran. And I want that life with you here in Virginia City, helping people, building something meaningful together." His smile was radiant as he leaned forward to kiss her, a gentle meeting of lips that held the promise of all that was to come. In the weeks that followed, Virginia City witnessed the emergence of an unusual but effective partnership. While Kieran established his authority as federal marshal, bringing a new era of lawful governance to the mining district, Katherine began work on her healing center. With funding from grateful mine owners and the support of the community, she converted a spacious building near the center of town into a facility that combined the best of traditional healing with modern medical practices. She hired nurses and assistants, trained them in her methods, and began treating patients from all walks of life: miners injured in accidents, children with fevers, women suffering from various ailments. News of her successful treatments spread throughout the territory. Patients began arriving from distant settlements, seeking the care of the miracle healer of Virginia City. But unlike in Tonopah, here the unusual nature of her cures brought admiration rather than suspicion. 3 months after Radley's capture, on a clear autumn day with golden light bathing the mountainside, Katherine Ellery and Kieran Wade were married in a small ceremony at the newly completed healing center. Mrs. Donovan served as Katherine's matron of honor, while Mackenzie stood as Kieran's best man. The territorial governor himself performed the ceremony, marking the occasion as one of particular significance for Virginia City. "You have both demonstrated exceptional courage in the face of evil," the governor proclaimed to the gathered guests. "And in doing so, you have not only liberated this city from corruption, but have shown us all the power of standing firm for what is right, regardless of the cost." At the reception that followed, Martha Miller arrived with a fully recovered Tommy, having made the journey from Tonopah specifically for the wedding. "I told everyone what really happened," Martha informed Katherine as they embraced, "about how you saved Tommy and so many others. Things are changing there. The new doctor even uses some of your remedies now." Katherine smiled, touched by the vindication. "Perhaps someday we'll visit. Or perhaps," Kieran suggested, joining them, "we could establish a second healing center there, a branch of what we're building here." The idea took root, growing along with their love and their work in Virginia City. By the following spring, Katherine's healing center had expanded to include a research facility where she documented her treatments and trained others in her methods. Kieran's efforts as marshal had transformed the mining district into a model of law and order, with systems in place to prevent another Radley from rising to power. Their home, a comfortable house overlooking the city, became known as a place of warmth and welcome for those in need. Katherine's garden, filled with medicinal herbs and plants from around the world, became famous throughout the territory. On their first anniversary, as they stood together in that garden watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Kieran wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "About staying in one place instead of moving on," Katherine leaned back against him, content in his embrace. "None," she assured him. "This is where I belong, where we belong. Even with all the responsibilities, the constant demands on our time," she turned in his arms to face him. "Especially because of those things. We're making a difference, Kieran, together," his eyes, so often serious, crinkled with happiness. "Together," he agreed, "the marshal and the witch. Is that what you call me in private?" She teased, reaching up to trace the scar on his cheek that had faded with time. "Only with the greatest admiration," he assured her. "You did cast a spell on me, after all, the most powerful magic there is." "And what magic is that?" "Love," he said simply. "The kind that transforms everything it touches." As the last light of day faded from the sky, Katherine Ellery Wade stood in the arms of the man who had saved her in more ways than one. From the desperate flight from Tonopah to the confrontation with Radley, their journey had been unlikely and often dangerous. But it had led them here to a life of purpose, respect, and deepest love. The supposed witch and the steadfast lawman had found in each other not just acceptance, but celebration of their unique gifts. And in doing so, they had created something neither could have achieved alone. A legacy of healing, justice, and hope that would endure long after the silver mines of Virginia City had yielded their last treasure. For in the end, the most precious silver was not that which came from the earth, but the threads of love and trust they had woven together, a tapestry strong enough to withstand whatever challenges the frontier might bring.